use much stuff around. The other piece is with regards to the home pavilion and the expo. So do take out some time to see the home pavilion and the expo when you guys are around. There's also a Dhanvantri temple, which is further down this road to your right. You can see the temple dome. So for those of you who wish to see a Dhanvantri temple, it's open in the mornings and the evenings, early mornings and evenings. So you can feel free to go there between, I think, 6 and 9 or 10. And in the evenings after 4. Right, so the other piece is with regards to social media. Many of you have made requests. So again, our hashtag is hashtag Vaidyagrama, so feel free to beep whatever you'll want to from the conference. You don't need any permission. If you write anything bad, we'll chant some mantras for you. Otherwise, you can continue to do whatever you wish to do. And just on that note, the live streaming has hit 37 countries on day 1 and 49 countries on day 2. So the live streaming of the conference has hit about 49 countries in total across. And the number of hits is more than 188,000, right? So that's the sort of hits we are getting on our live streaming. All right? So having said that, we do have our presenters. Continuing from yesterday's session, they again need no introduction. From an Ayurveda or a yoga or a Jyotisha standpoint, with all respects and honors, Dr. Zclaudia Welch and Dr. Svoboda, if we can have you on stage. Thank you. And if you guys have any questions through this, please jot them down. And before the second session, you can hand it over to Paula, who's out here. So do write down your questions. So while there won't be a Q&A from the audience directly, but do pass it to Paula, and then we can take it from there. Or she'll come by and collect it. Thank you.
Can you hear okay with us? Good. If the sound starts getting funky, just let us know, will you?
How will they do that?
Raise your hand wildly like this. Good idea?
Maybe it would be more, maybe everyone should point to the ear.
Okay. Point to the ear. That's the new signal. That's the clue.
Ganapatigang Havamahe Kavim Kavinam Upamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspata Anaha Shrinvannu Tibi Siddha Sadhanam Mahaganapataye Namaha. Om Adityaya Cha Somaya Mangalaya Buddhaya Cha Guru Shukra Shanibhyascha Rahave Ketave Namaha. Suprabhatam. Good morning. It is now Sunday. Yesterday was Saturday. It may interest you to know that mythologically, the sun is Saturn's father. Since we provided a relatively extensive story of Saturn yesterday, it would seem appropriate to at least touch on how it is that mythologically Saturn became the son of the sun. The sun had one wife. Her name was Sangnya. She provided the sun with 3 children. And then she decided that her spouse was simply too bright for her. It's understandable. She'd been living with him for a long time. And his brilliance never dimmed. Sometimes this is the way that it happens when you are living with someone in whose horoscope the sun is very strong. Because that sun, as a graha, a thing that takes them over, will cause them always to want to shine out, whether they have anything to actually shine out with or not. Sometimes it's actual brilliance that they display. Sometimes it is something rather of the nature of brilliance that they would like to express, but and are being pressed upon by the sun, by the Surya Graha to express, even though they may not actually have it in them to shine. Mythologically, in the case of the sun, here was the sun shining, and I expect that Sangnya, the sun's wife, tried to explain to her husband her challenges in this context and was unable to do so. Possibly, again, because when you're in the presence of something that is so brilliant as the sun, nothing else can be seen. And so, in fact, although it is the case that with many of the grahas, with many of the planets up in the sky, when you see them together, not too close together, because then that becomes a graha yuddha, a planetary war, a competition between 2 of the planets to try to get your attention. Because, of course, everything wants your attention, including all of these 9 grahas. Everything in the universe is searching for your attention, because your attention means your prana. Everything lives off of everything else. Jivo jivasya jivitam. And everything wants some of your prana. Everything has an agenda. All of the grahas have their own agendas. And so the agenda of the sun is to shine out brilliantly. And unfortunately, when things are too bright, you may not be able to see something that is caught in that luster, in that effulgence. So when a planet is too close to the sun, that planet is said to be ast. It has set, it has descended into the underworld that is generated by the overworld that is created by the sun. So Sanya, poor woman, was feeling kind of combusted by the sun. So she decided that she would try to be proactive about the situation. So she came down to earth and started to do some penance so she would better be able to withstand the luster of her shining husband. The sun, because he was so brilliant and bright and shining and busy expressing his vibrations in all directions, did not actually notice she was gone for several years. Long enough to have 3 more children on a woman that she thought, that the sun thought was in fact his wife, but in fact was the shadow of his wife that his wife had brought to life and put in her place, dressed her up like her, and told her, here, you be the sun's wife for a while. I'm going elsewhere. So the sun was actually blinded by his own brilliance and by his own effulgence. Something that we occasionally see happening to people who are overly solar. There's always a blind spot in every human being. And sometimes, in the case of solar people, that blind spot is bigger than it is in others because they are so solar. In any case, the sun was unable to notice that that his wife had gone, and he had 3 children from this second wife until there was a brouhaha in the house. And finally, the situation was put to right, but not before the planet Saturn was born. And Saturn, whose job it is to make everyone suffer, immediately made the sun suffer as well. And from that moment, the sun and Saturn have had a very uneasy relationship. And astrologically, it is said that the sun is the enemy of Saturn, and Saturn is the enemy of the sun. And we can even think into the context of human society, to the fact that sometimes it does happen that fathers and sons are inimical to one another. And sometimes it is the case that this happens because the father is too brilliant or too powerful, or is somehow overwhelming, is preventing the offspring from being able to sprout on their own because they're in the shadow being created by the powerful, overbearing personality of the parent. It's not uncommon for this to happen, and we have seen it many times in history. It's not uncommon for this to happen to a ruler and his or her child, and this ties in very attractively to this mythology because the sun is the reason for life on Earth. The sun is the reason for the solar system. The sun is the reason why we have light. So the sun is very much the king of the planetary cabinet. The sun represents rulers, chiefs, presidents, heads of state, heads of organizations. The sun is the apex graha, and therefore it represents everyone who is at the apex of whatever organization they're part of. So it is not surprising that we would have kings and princesses who wouldn't get along with one another, because one has the power, the other one wants the power, and there's a disagreement over how the power is going to be transferred. A famous example in this very country was the Emperor Akbar and his son Salim, who eventually became the Emperor Jahangir. Akbar was a very fine emperor, perhaps a better emperor than a father. But it was simply that the son was, Akbar's son was so fascinated by the possibility of sitting on the throne and taking on the authority that comes from that position, that he neglected his own filial duty and focused more on the power. And it's probably here a good point to note that the sun is a krura graha. Krura means cruel. There are said to be two real benefic grahas in Jyotisha, Jupiter and Venus. Neither one of them is a perfect benefic. Mythologically, Jupiter has all kinds of good qualities, but mythologically also he forced himself upon his brother's wife. Very bad karma. Shukra is certainly also a great guru, the planet Venus, but Shukra has its own limitations. Tends to be a bit self-indulgent.
And is the king of the Asuras.
The guru of the Asuras. So we have the guru of the Devatas and the guru of the Asuras. These are the two auspicious planets. Even though they're not perfectly auspicious, they're pretty darned auspicious. And we have Mercury, who's auspicious when he's with someone who's auspicious, and not auspicious when he's with somebody who's not auspicious. The moon, who's auspicious when she is waxing and strong, and is inauspicious when she is waning and weak. And the sun, who is cruel. How many of you have ever been outside with no cover, no umbrella, no shade at 3 p.m. in July in North India? That's all you need to know. Krura means cruel. The sun is cruel in the tropics. The other four planets, of course, are we translate them into English as malefics, which means things that have malified intentions, that are in that context sort of evil. But they're not evil. In Sanskrit, the word is a better one. They're papa grahas. They are grahas that indicate the presence of papa karma, which means karma that is going to give you a lot of trouble once you have to actually digest it. Some people translate it as sin, but it's not sin. You're not punished for your karmas. You're punished by your karmas. And of course, Saturn is the most undesirable of all the undesirable planets. Ketu, Rahu, Mars, Saturn. And it's interesting that we go from Saturday, the day of the final day of the oldest planet, the darkest planet, the one that indicates demise and deterioration and so on, to the day of the sun, the beginning of a new week, the beginning of a new life, the beginning of a new reality.
Well, it occurs to me that there's reason for the sun and Shani to be inimical towards one another, partially because, as we heard yesterday, when Saturn was born, he looked at his father, and that caused his father suffering, and during Sare Sati, he gives all kinds of trouble. But a little bit more meaningful to me in some ways that this, what is the sun? It's the center of our solar system. And if sun is prominent in the chart, and especially Lagnesh, the lord of the chart, there tends to be a feeling of the whole world is revolving around me. And to a certain degree, that's true for all of us. If we weren't here, we wouldn't have a world to revolve around. So it's true to some degree. But when this happens to an excess, when we feel, oh, the whole world is revolving around me, I am all that, then if we look at that role of the sun, where it's its natural role, there's nothing, for people with a strong sun in their chart, it's not like they're trying to be narcissistic. It's that this is the way they see things. That I'm the center of things, because that's the natural role of the sun, is being the center of everything moving around it. And if there's something that Shani does, is to humble individuals. So how annoying would it be if that's your job? It's precisely opposite. You see, the sun is all about me being at the center, and Shani is all about stopping that. So to me, that feels very inherently inimical. That how can there be harmony quite with that? And so that makes sense to me. And one of the things with all of this is, again, what's good and what's bad. So is it bad to have the sun in the middle of your chart and feel like the world is revolving around you? What's good and what's bad? Someone told me that they left here yesterday and they heard someone saying, so what is good and what is evil, and what is the difference between the Asuras and the Devas, which is what we started talking about yesterday. And I very much like the omen that I talked about yesterday, about the guy who says, well, the difference between them, as far as is concerned, as far as this author's opinion went, is that the Devas see the possibility beyond the material. So we looked at that in terms of, maybe we could say, Western science, Western thought, practical, logical stuff being up on a pedestal, and a more holistic view of things. But I would also suggest that even within these somewhat esoteric traditions, Ayurveda, Jyotish, Sanskrit, all these Indian traditions that we consider to be more holistic, even within that we may have gotten kind of rigid. So even within this, to be able to look outside the possibility and think, what am I being rigid about? How can I step out of that box? And I just mentioned this because Aditya asked if you have any questions, and this will be true for the next days that we're speaking. The first hour we'll speak, and the second hour will be for questions and answers. So you can write down your questions and give them to Paula, who is sitting over there. And also, when you do that, if you yourself look inside, so that this is not just a one-way thing, we're having a dialogue in a sense, and it's difficult to do that with so many people, but if you have thought yourself about what is the difference between good and bad, and what is the Deva and the Asura in me, how do I internalize this, then we would love to hear that. We may not read them all. We may read some of them. We'll read them all, but we may not read them all aloud. But we'll read some of them aloud to just think about what that is. What is the difference between good planets and bad planets, and good dashas and bad dashas, and so forth? It's an interesting meditation. And this has to do with the good and bad and so forth. Has to do with the life on this planet, and seeing things through eyes of duality, seeing things as one way or another, seeing things as hot or cold, heavy or light, dry or oily, the 10 pairs of opposites that we know and love or don't in Ayurveda. And the sun is very much a representative of one side of this duality, is it not? So it's kind of interesting. Today is Sunday, tomorrow is Monday, tomorrow is governed by the moon, and the moon is representative of the other side of these 10 pairs of qualities. So the sun, the solar qualities are the Lungana qualities, the Apatarpana qualities, the qualities that are drying and reducing and stimulating and motivating. Whereas the lunar qualities are more Brahmana or Santarpana, more grounding and nourishing and lubricating. So this is a duality that's represented as well, good, bad, hot, cold, lunar, solar. So solar is a very interesting planet right now, because I mean, when we think about global warming, this is a predominance of the solar qualities, right? And then that's happening on a macrocosm. So what's happening on a microcosm? What are we doing? What are we feeling that's contributing to this global situation? And this global situation, of course, is having ramifications outside of our atmosphere, outside of the Earth's atmosphere. It's just kind of on a level that we can't wrap our heads around. But if it's true that the microcosm is in the macrocosm and the macrocosm is in the microcosm, to really consider carefully our relationship with solar qualities, hot, dry, fast, sharp, all of these things, if this is predominating in our world now and threatening our world and threatening species with extinction, how are we contributing to this? What's going on with this? And this is something that we could talk about for a long time. I think specifically for women, this is a very important issue, and perhaps at the root of a pandemic of women's issues. Women are in trouble, outspending resources financially, physically, spiritually, all the time, pushing and pushing for some kind of ambition, some kind of goal. And we're doing that in our professions, no matter what our professions are, even if they're Ayurveda and yoga. There is absolutely no reason that I have seen, or no reality that I've seen, that women or men in the field of Ayurveda or Jyotish or yoga are any more balanced than anyone else sometimes, because there's such a push. There's nobody more exhausted than someone who runs a yoga studio. This is supposed to be relaxation. It's for relaxation for everybody else, all you people, but me, no. You know, because I'm going to run the whole thing and run myself into the ground. And we could talk about this for 12 weeks instead of 12 minutes. But to really consider, are these good qualities or are these bad qualities, these solar qualities? We have global warming. Is that good or bad? Or is it just a matter of how much? It's good up until this point, and then it becomes detrimental. And where are we in that? Where are we in that? How is that manifesting inside of us? So it's a long discussion, but what do we do about it? One of the things is we start paying attention to and committing to a balanced relationship between lunar and solar realities. One of the ways that I especially like to do this is through Nadi Shodhana. How many of you do not know what Nadi Shodhana is? Okay. How about Anulom Vilom? How many of you do not know what that is? All right, so those are very similar. And what it is it's an alternate nostril breathing. How many of you do not know what an alternate nostril breathing technique looks like? Okay, so everybody is aware of that. Usually you use your fingers, but today we're not going to, because of reasons I'll say in a minute. But you know, usually you use your fingers, you put these two down, and you use this little toggle up here in order to do this certain pattern, where you breathe in on the left and out on the right, and in on the right and out on the left. But today and tomorrow, we'd like to take 20 minutes or so and practice this without the fingers, because what happens is we think, okay, alternate nostril breathing. This is about the nostrils and which nostril is open. But it really isn't. It's about Ida and Pingala. Pingala being the solar channel that rises on the right side of the spine, and Ida being the lunar channel, which descends on the left side of the spine. So they're not just about the nostrils. This is not about breathing through the right nostril or the left nostril. It's about harmonizing these channels that represent duality in a huge way in our own system, in the most fundamental way. from a certain perspective, if we look at the channel system of the mind and we look at where the mind roams in the body, it roams all over the body, especially so in the 10 great vessels. And especially so in 3 vessels, which are Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna. Especially so in Sushumna, but for most of us, we don't know what to do with Sushumna, so we might as well leave that alone. We're in the world of duality, so how can we harmonize that? So one of the simplest, fastest, free techniques that I've ever seen, most powerful techniques that I've ever seen, is working with these 2 channels to balance these energies so that we're not living our lives motivated by stress, and we are not falling into a state of lethargy and depression or something, either in response to that or as sort of a natural challenge area for our own selves. So balancing these 2 is very useful. But it's not the nostrils, it's the channels. These are channels, and when we look at the word nadi shodhana, the 2 words, nadi shodhana, nadi being the channel and shodhana being the forcible expulsion of what's obstructing it. So that's what those words mean. So when we're doing nadi shodhana, how we're harmonizing it is we are dredging whatever is obstructing those channels. We're dredging that out. We're opening and clearing that channel and allowing that channel to be receptive to whatever pranic flow and rhythm is naturally wanting to express itself in that channel at that moment, at that time. So this is something that's useful to do, and I like doing it without the hands sometimes because it really, prana follows focus. So where we're focusing, prana will follow. Prana will feed that. So if we're focusing on the nostril, prana will go there and focus on the nostril. It's not all that useful. And if we're just doing this without great focus, what's going to happen is the breath, the prana, is going to move in the path of least resistance. So if we've got some kind of blockages in these channels, in these nadis, the prana will just move around them. It won't move through them, and it won't create the shodhana effect of nadi shodhana. It won't actually cleanse the channel. It won't clear the channel. It'll move the prana, and that'll be nice, but it'll keep reinforcing, or at the very least not correcting, what we've already become. And what we've become is the obstructions that have lodged themselves in these channels. So if we want to become something different, unbecome what we've become, dissolve some of these patterns that have become so ingrained in us that they have obstructed these channels, then what we want to do is really focus, bring our focus, which brings the prana there. Prana is not the breath. They work together, but they are not synonymous, right? Prana follows focus. So our main focus in this is focus, so that prana can nourish this channel. Now, when we do this exercise, we might think, oh, I don't think I'm feeling Ida, I don't think I'm feeling Pingala, I feel like I'm just imagining this. Imagining is A-okay. That's perfectly fine, because you're imagining, so you're focusing on something, and that's feeding the prana, and that in a sense creates the channel, right? The channel is there, but it's just kind of defaultly there. We're not giving attention to it, so prana's doing whatever it's doing there. And this is not to say that this technique is the technique, it's the beginning and all end-all technique. This is just a technique to get us in touch with these channels. And then once we're really in touch with them, those channels themselves will be more in touch when we close our external sensory apparatus and open our internal sensory apparatus. We will be more in touch with what is naturally wanting to happen in that channel, and we can follow the prana at that point. But at this point, at the beginning, it's nice to develop a relationship with the channel, nourish that channel with the prana, and remove obstructions. Now, who's about removing obstructions? Shani is about removing obstructions. Shani is the son of the sun. One of the things I first like to do before doing any kind of nadi shodhana is try to dissolve the obstructions that are there, obstructing the lunar and solar pathways, right? And we won't spend a lot of time on this because we only have a limited amount of time. But we'll do a little bit of that. And we might do some of this tomorrow too, so I would suggest eating lightly tomorrow morning because it's nice to not do this on a very full stomach. And by the way, this is fine to do even if you're pregnant, even if you're sick. There's just, if you're pregnant and you have a tenuous pregnancy, if you have a history of miscarriages, something like that, this won't cause a miscarriage, but if you have a very tenuous pregnancy, you don't want to ever work with energy going down if there's any chance of a miscarriage, right? So if you're at all concerned that you don't want to do this because Bill will be moving energy up and moving prana back down, if you're at all concerned for any reason, if you're pregnant and you're at all concerned, then just breathe into your lower abdomen and just kind of breathe normally and relax, and you can just let it go in one ear and out the other. But I've never seen this practice cause harm to anyone. So this time we do want to be sitting comfortably. So are you sitting comfortably? Something that you can hold for about 20 minutes or so. You want to say anything before we do this?
Maybe afterwards.
Okay. All right, before you close your eyes, this will be really good to do with your eyes closed, but let me just talk through something with you so you can kind of get a visual of what we're going to do. And talk us through a little bit of, this is the Annamaya Kosha, the physical body. It ends at the skin. The Pranamaya Kosha extends beyond the physical body as far out as the energy is extending in a palpable way. Maybe the energy is extending quite a lot, but see where it really ends in a palpable way. Because prana follows attention, and most of us are focused forward more than backward, our pranamaya kosha tends to be a little bigger in front of us. And since we're somewhat aware on our sides, tends to be not quite as big on the sides, but somewhat. And it tends to be fairly scant in the back, because unless we're a policeman or an Aikido master, we're not paying much attention to what's going on behind us, and prana follows focus. So we don't have a lot of back prana often. And so we'll feel that. We'll take a minute and feel these pranamaya koshas. And then what we'll do is we'll try to clean them a little bit, all right? So we'll take from where we're sitting up to about the bottom of the rib cage as the first, maybe a little lower, about the belly button, a little above the belly button. I'm going to take this lower abdomen, and we're going to inhale from the core of it out to the boundary of the pranamaya kosha, exhale back. I'm going to talk us through this, but just so that you get a little bit of a visual. And we're going to look around that area, again with our eyes closed, but our internal sensory apparatus aware. We'll look around, we'll see, we'll feel, is there any tight spots, sticky spots, dark spots, and we'll breathe into those areas and try to dissolve those. Then we'll do the same thing from about the belly button to under the breasts for this area. And then we'll do the chest, and then we'll do the neck, and then we'll do the head. And we'll do it rather quickly, but this could be you can do this for a long time. It's also something you can do if you're in a difficult situation emotionally, something like that. It gives us something to focus on. You're in a social situation that you're feeling awkward in, and awkwardness is just a part of life, so it's going to happen. What do? This is something you can do. You can just turn the attention inward, and you can keep your eyes open and do this, but just kind of bring your attention inward and look around and feel around and dissolve any spots that are obstructing the free flow of prana. So then we'll start doing the nadi shodhana. So we'll bring our attention from the core of the earth, and we'll bring it on the inhale up the left side of the body. And we'll bring it, so I'm pointing on the outside of my body, of course, but the energy is going to be going along the spine, just along the spine in the middle of the body. So along the spine, so we'll be inhaling, inhaling, and don't rush this process. I'll talk us through it, but we're going to bring the prana up through the whole left side of the body, the left side of the face, the left eye, up through a little over the top of the head to have a gentle pause and exhale down the right side of the body. And when we're doing this, if you haven't done this much before, and perhaps even if you have, but you haven't focused on it very much, it might be really difficult to, you really want to go millimeter by millimeter along the spine. And if you can't have the focus that much, it's going to take some time. And you may not be able to get all the way up here in one breath. So, two things you can do. You're inhaling, 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 and say you're inhaling as long as you can, and you can only get your focus up to about here. So there's two things you can do. You can continue moving the prana up on the exhale. Why not? And so on the exhale, 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 and then you run out of exhale around here. Then you just keep inhaling it up. The pathway is more important than getting all the way there in one breath. So then the same thing on the way down. You're exhaling down, and you're doing it very minutely, and you're following the pathway, but you only get to about here. Well, then you can inhale and keep inhaling the prana downwards, and then exhale it down. So you've got that? You got the game? So that's one way you can do it. The other way, if that feels just too weird to go up on the exhale or up on the inhale, it doesn't feel natural to you, you're going up on the inhale, 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 and then you run out of breath. You can just kind of nail it there, situate it there, exhale, and then on your next inhale, keep ascending the prana. You follow? So those are the two ways you can do it. The most important thing is the focus. So let's close our eyes and allow the breath to become a little longer, a little slower, but please no counting, no need to count with this, and no need to strain. Please don't strain. If you find yourself hungry for breath, just you've gone too far. Just this should be a very natural, gentle process. So keeping the breath rather long and slow, see if you can trace the boundary of your Annamaya kosha, your physical body, with your awareness. So this is basically tracing your skin on your body with your awareness. But notice that it's somewhat easier to find the boundary of the Annamaya kosha. Our eyes are closed now, right? We're using our internal sensory apparatus. Notice that it is somewhat easier to feel the boundary of the skin on, say, the back of the hands, or with the wind blowing on your skin somewhere, the fan blowing on your skin somewhere. But notice that it might be a little hard to actually feel that boundary of the skin where the physical body ends around the chest or other areas of the body. It's not quite as definite a boundary as we think. So it's almost a little easier to extend, to get out of that box of the physical body and extend that there's this possibility that my life and my form extend out beyond my physical boundary, the skin. And feel how far out your prana extends around your body. See if you can trace that boundary with your awareness as your breathing is slow and long, and gentle and natural. And you're breathing at this point in the low abdomen. Low abdomen expanding when you inhale and relaxing to the core on the exhale. Bring the awareness to the core of the earth. And inhale up through the core of the earth, up through the entire pranamaya kosha, filling the entire prana kosha like a balloon. Bring the awareness over the top of the head. Have a gentle pause and exhale the prana down the core of the being, including the spinal cord, all the way down through the body, back down into the core of the earth. A gentle pause. Inhale again, up through the entire pranamaya kosha, from the bottom to the top, up over the top of the head. Gentle pause. Exhale the prana down the core of the being into the core of the earth. A couple more times like that at your own pace. And now bring awareness to the lower third of the torso, from where you're sitting up to just over the belly button, somewhere around there that feels natural. And inhale from the core of your being at that level, out to the boundary of the pranamaya kosha at that level. Gentle pause and relax the prana back to the core of the being. A couple more times like that at your own pace, front, back, side to side. Inhaling out, filling the pranamaya kosha at that level, exhaling back to the core. And on the next few inhales and exhales, look around in that space and see if there's a tight spot, a sticky spot, a dark spot, and inhale right into that spot and allow it to immediately and instantly transform into space, unobstructed space. If you need to breathe, have a couple of breaths to do that, that's fine, and then move on to another spot that might feel sticky or tight. Now with your next breath or two, imagine that the prana in this area, in this lower third, is moving around like a whirlpool, slow-moving whirlpool, inhaling around so that it's being washed in a homogeneous way. Dissolving obstructions. And then inhale from the core of the being at that level again to the boundary of the pranamaya kosha. Exhale back to the core a couple times at your own space and time and pace. And bring the awareness to the middle third of the pranamaya kosha, from just over the belly button to just under the breasts, including the rib cage. Inhale from the core of the being, out to the boundary of the pranamaya kosha, gentle pause, and exhale back to the core of the being. And again, take a few breaths to look around internally and see at this level where there are any dark spots, sticky spots, tight spots. And breathe right into those spots and allow them to dissolve one by one. And the next few breaths allow this kind of slow whirlpool, like moving brandy in a brandy snifter, kind of the prana smoothly moving around in either direction, clockwise or clockwise, whatever feels good to you, to soothe out and homogenize the feeling of prana in that level. And then have a couple of more breaths, just inhaling from the core of the being at that level out to the boundary of the pranamaya kosha. Gentle pause, exhale back to the core at that level. A couple more breaths like that at your own pace. And bring the awareness to the upper third of the torso. So this is from just below the breasts, up to the shoulders, up to the beginning of the neck. So it includes the lungs, the heart, the shoulders, the shoulder blades, the chest. Inhale from the center of this area, from the core of this area, out to the boundary of the pranamaya kosha at this area. Gentle pause. And exhale back to the core of the being. Gentle pause, couple more breaths like that at your own pace. Take a couple breaths. Look around this area for the dark spots, sticky spots, tight spots. Bring the prana, the awareness, the breath right into those spots, and breathe right into them, allow them to dissolve and resolve. Don't forget the back of the body. And a couple more breaths from the core of the being at this level to the boundary of the pranamaya kosha, the prana body at this level. Exhaling back to the core. A few more breaths like that at your own speed. And bringing the awareness to the throat. Inhale from the core of the throat area, the neck area. Inhale to the boundary of the pranamaya kosha at this area. A gentle pause. And unlike the other areas, at this point, on the exhale, continue to move the prana outward. And on your next breath, breathe from the core of the neck, the throat, again to the boundary of the pranamaya kosha, and again on the exhale, continuing to move that prana outwards. We get very stuck in our neck and our throat and our thyroid with stuck energy, so it's nice to just kind of move it outward. A couple more breaths like that at your own speed. And inhale up through the face, up over the top of the head. Exhale down the core of the being into the core of the earth. Gentle pause. Inhale up through the entire pranamaya kosha, up over the top of the head. Gentle pause and exhale down the core of the being into the core of the earth. Couple more breaths like that at your own pace. If you start to feel dizzy or have a headache, then just start to breathe into your lower abdomen. On your next breath, imagine that you're only breathing through your left nostril. You're breathing prana from the core of the earth up the left side of your spine, close to the spine. Bring that breath millimeter by millimeter. Don't miss any areas of the spine. Bring the prana very slowly with great focus up the left side of the spine. If you run out of breath, you can continue breathing, exhaling, inhaling, just bringing the prana slowly up the left side of the spine. up through the face, up through the left eye, up over the top of the head. Have a gentle pause wherever you are there, and then bring the prana slowly back down the right side of the body, through the right eye, along the core of the body, the right side of the core of the body, the right side of the spine, close to the spine, in the middle of the body. Bringing the prana all the way down, millimeter by millimeter, down into the core of the earth. Have a gentle pause. Inhale the prana back up the right side, slowly, slowly. If you can do it faster, that's fine. If not, the much more important part is bringing the prana millimeter by millimeter. Your hands are just relaxed in your lap. Your eyes are closed, but your internal sensory apparatus is focused on this pathway, moving up the right side of the body, up over the top of the head, gentle pause, and ending this cycle by moving again down the left side of the body. Exhaling down through the left eye, the left side of the face, the left side of the throat, the left side of the spine, along the torso, millimeter by millimeter, engaging the Shodhana part of Nadi Shodhana, unblocking this channel and developing a relationship with it, bringing that into the core of the earth, the awareness, and doing some more cycles like this at your very own pace, your very own honest, slow, unstrained pace. Up the left side, down the right side, up the right side, down the left side is one cycle. Keep doing that. Up the left, down the right, up the right, down the left, at your own pace. You're going up the left, down the right, down the left, starting again up the left, down the right. When your mind wanders, bring it back. Don't worry too much about whether or not your air is actually moving through only the left side or only the right side. Just imagine that it's just moving in the left when you're in the left side, and that it's moving through the right nostril when you're on the right side. And don't give attention to what's actually happening, just the imagination and the experience of the feel the air against the nostril as it's coming in on the left side or on the right side. When you've finished your next round and you've exhaled at the bottom of the left, you end on the left, bring your awareness to the core of the earth and inhale from the core of the earth up through the entire pranamaya kosha, from the bottom up to the top, up over the top of the head. Gentle pause and exhale down the core of the being, back down into the core of the earth. Do this a few more times at your own pace. Allow the breath to return to the lower abdomen, expanding the lower abdomen on the inhale, allowing it to relax on the exhale. Allow the breath to return to normal. Allow the eyes to open slowly, trying to retain some awareness of what's going on inside the body as we bring our awareness to the external reality. Most of us know that the definition of svasta, health, is to be established in the self. And it's a curious thing, because what is the self? If you're not completely enlightened, what is the self? It's not being established in the mind and the mental chatter, and it's not being established in the emotions. So what can we establish in? One thing we can establish in is the prana, a relationship with the prana. You don't have to be enlightened, you don't have to be religious, you don't have to follow a certain belief system to have a relationship with reality. And the reality in our physical beings is that prana is moving, and it's either moving in an obstructed way that we feel tense and tight and anxious, or it's moving smoothly. So this is one way to balance the solar and lunar energies and keep them at some kind of equilibrium. It's one way we can practically try to follow the Gita's words, samatvam yoga uchate, the highest kind of yoga is equilibrium. It's one way to cultivate equilibrium that doesn't have to do with the physical body or the mental body, which are both rather difficult to change. The prana body, the pranamaya kosha, fortunately, is much easier to change. It can change instantaneously. The only reason we don't feel that change sometimes is because we're so focused on the physical body and not the prana body. So if you had trouble finding those dark spots, sticky spots, when we were doing the Saturn part, the dissolving obstructions part, then it's possible that you were focusing on the annamaya kosha, the physical body, more than the pranamaya kosha. And the awareness needs to be more aligned with the prana than the physical tissues, so that we can actually feel those dark spots, those tight spots resolving and transforming. And I'll stop talking in just a minute, let my good friend talk. But one thing that occurs to me too is when we look at the planets, each of the planets, we always think of Saturn as being the one that dissolves obstructions and deals with obstructions. But if we look at the description of each of the planets for the 7 days, and Rahu and Ketu, each one of them says, oh, if you appease me, I will dissolve your obstructions and give you good things, and if you piss me off, I'll give you bad things. You could pick any one. Any one of them says, I will help you enormously, you'll be so happy if you please me, and you'll be miserable if you don't. So there's some, we each can have some kind of form of the divine that we identify with, that we align with, that we need to work with, that's either a strength of ours or a weakness that we want to align with, and work with that, and that can help dissolve obstructions. But this one specifically works with Saturn, the dissolving obstruction things, and our internal system of duality, of good and bad and right and wrong and hot and cold and so on, which is represented by Ida and Pingala. So we've gone over the hour, and we have some questions here, and I'll turn it over to you.
The very fact that we have a concept of time is because of the sun. The sun provides us with the day. The sun provides us with the year. The sun is said to represent the Atma, the supreme reality of unlimited awareness, both internally in the form of the internal sun, which one representative of which is the Pingala, the Surya, or the Ganga Nadi, and the external representative of which is the external sun. The working with the two nadis is the property, or is the subject of a particular special branch of Vidya that is known as Svoboda, often called Shiva Svoboda, because the text that we have on this subject was transmitted from Shiva to Parvati. Parvati, as is common in these texts, asked the question, Shiva provided the opinions. And the Shiva Svoboda, among other things, offers you suggestions about which of these nadis should be working when. Which nadi ideally will be working when you're out trying to achieve something in the world, and what you're trying to achieve will be most applicable, which nadi would be most applicable to that. Another part of Svoboda, though, suggests that there are certain times of day that you should pay particular attention to your nadis so that you can be better aligned, so that you can better align your internal cosmos, your microcosm, with the external cosmos. And so Svoboda suggests that you pay close attention to which nadi is working at the time of sunrise. Sunrise, the beginning of a new day, is, in the way, beginning of a new life for yourself. You have emerged from the tamas of sleep. You've emerged into a day that is full of new possibilities. And Svoboda suggests that there are ways, and there are different approaches, of course, because there's always different possibilities. There's never one particular way that everyone has to do something, at least in the Indian system of knowledge. There are always alternatives. But the suggestion is that whichever alternative you suggest, and they're a bit too complex to go into at the moment, whichever alternative you suggest, you should attempt to become regular in that alternative, to find a way to create regularity between the way that your internal cosmos is working and the way the external cosmos is working. And the sun represents regularity, because regularly it rises in almost the same position every day, and it sets in almost the same position every day. Yes, it is moving slightly to the north or to the south. It actually is not moving, but as far as you and I are concerned, it appears to be moving to our senses. And so even though we know there's Galileo and Copernicus and everybody else, somewhere deep in our tissues we know that that's all crap. And really, it is those things out there that are moving, and we are the ones that are standing still, because our senses are providing us with that information at a very deep level, a level that we have been experiencing for many hundreds of thousands of years more than we have had the awareness that, in fact, things are different from how we perceive them. The fact is that regularity is being a variation in the context of duality, and particularly in the context of duality of the two grahas that we're dealing with today and tomorrow. The moon represents everything that is changeable in the world, and the sun represents everything that is firm and fixed. In fact, there are 2 points during the year when the sun actually appears to stand still, the solstice. the winter solstice and the summer solstice. And the winter solstice is about to happen, because that's the point where it appears that from the moving further and further and further in the northern hemisphere into the south, once we get to about December 21st or 22nd, the sun appears to start moving into the north again. But it's a very slow and progressive movement, and the sun represents that slow, kind of inexorable, progressive, regular movement. Regularity and the sun always go together. And then in the same way that sunrise and the period just before sunrise are said to be particularly useful for meditating, because that's the time when presumably you know that ordinarily you only breathe out of one nostril at a time, and ordinarily you're shifting from one nostril to another. Hopefully you're shifting on a regular basis, and hopefully you're spending approximately the same amount of time in one nostril that you're spending in another nostril. Naturally, if you have a deviated septum, this may be a difficult thing for you to do. But your system will be attempting to do that because it wants to, relatively speaking, be providing an equal amount of prana to both of these giant channels, so that your system will be maintaining a balance of the warming up, expanding, becoming stronger and more actively active and directive. It is the province of the right channel, and the cooler, calming down, slightly contracting, becoming juicier, becoming less directive and more receptive. That is the province of the left side of the left channel of the organism. Naturally, when the sun is strong, either in the world or in the horoscope, there's going to be a tendency for the sun to be stronger, to be manifesting itself stronger in you, and it will be worthwhile, particularly for you, if you know that this is the case, to be doing things like this exercise we were just doing, to encourage your body to be able to realign itself by not putting too much energy into the right side of things, by making sure right and left are better balanced. And as we will see tomorrow, similarly for the left nostril. The seasons of the year, of course, relate to are created for us by the sun, and the seasons in the organism, the seasons of the day, are also being created substantially by the sun. The morning season, where the activity is slowly gaining momentum, the noon season, when the brightness of the sun and the intensity of its rays are at their height, the late afternoon and evening season, where they move back into the direction of being less important and then disappear again. That externality that is happening in the seasons of the outer world is happening in the inner world also. The better you align yourself with that, the better that you pay attention to the fact that there are not only are the doshas activated at different times during the day and the evening, but the 5 elements are activated, because after all the doshas are only made of the 5 elements, and they are moving through their own cycle all during the day and all during the night, but that cycle is being ultimately governed by the sun. Yesterday evening I was able to hear the part of the address that Dr. Gopakumar was offering, and he said something that I thought was very useful. And what he said was that even though sometimes it is not easy for students of Ayurveda and students of Jyotish and students of, let's say, music, to communicate with one another, because these are very abstruse subjects that they have their own, even though often they're elaborated in Sanskrit, they have their own very specific terminologies, and a word that means one thing in one system may mean something different in another system. What all of these forms of vidya do have in common is that all of them are based in the 5 elements. So if his proposal was that we start to put yet even further attention on the reality of these 5 elements as they manifest in the context of these different disciplines, for the purpose of finding ways, even whether or not they may be explicit, at least implicitly somewhere within our awareness, to be able to recognize correspondences between, let's say, the element of fire, the Agni, which naturally is the basic element of the sun. Without the sun, there would be no heat. Without the sun, there would be no light. And we, who have been using, our species, who has been using fire ever since we were created as a species, humans have been using fire for 1 million years or maybe more. But that fire, of course, is coming from the sun that is being trapped in plants, and we're then taking advantage of it. So the fire element, really, the basis of our experience of fire is, in fact, the sun. So when you think of the sun, you can think of it as a giant orb in the sky, and you can think of the fact that it rules the bones in astrology, and you can think about the fact that it's a pitta-increasing planet, all of these things, but fundamentally all of these things boil down to the fact that the sun is the primary manifestation of the fire element in the cosmos in which you and I are currently tenanting. And every time we find fire in some other area in our lives that we may not have earlier thought might have somehow been related to the sun, it will be useful for us, at the very least, to note that the sun must somehow be involved if we are being scorched, directly or indirectly. We can appreciate the sun for its ability to scorch, and we can also bow down to it. Bowing down is the thing that you're most supposed to do for the sun. Shiva likes abhishek, pouring water on top of his head. The goddess likes alankara, being decorated, and the sun likes namaskara. The sun likes to be bowed down to because he is very important, and he is quite aware of that. So this means that bowing down to the fire element is also a very prudent thing to do. And it is very prudent because it is so powerful, because it is the thing that is providing us according to some people at least, the one thing that is most significant from the perspective of what makes us human. The first word in the Rig Veda, after Om, of course, is Agni. And therefore, I see that we have a number of questions here. Salute the sun. Om Suryaya Namaha, Om Raviye Namaha, Om Martandaya Namaha. Next.
Well, we have a lot of questions, and I love these questions, the ones that I've read. They're really wonderful, and one of the things that is wonderful about them, I was going to say...
Is that they have nothing to do with what we're talking about?
No, some of them don't. But one of the things that's great is that they're not your personal health questions and your personal Jyotish questions.
Yeah, thank you for not doing that.
Thank you for not doing that, and please, if you do that,
Seriously.
we can't answer them. Because it's not only because we're mean, although sometimes we're mean, but the thing is it's a disservice. If you say, oh, I just got a quick question, what do I do about my fibromyalgia? It's a quick question, but it's a long answer. And it's not, it does a disservice to try to address your personal question about Jyotish or health in a situation like this. That really, really is best served in the sacred relationship and space and time of a personal health care practitioner. So if we get those questions, we won't be answering them, and we didn't get any, and I'm really grateful to that. And
so far.
Keep it up.
Keep it up.
Please. One thing I want to mention before going into this is just because I feel like I really want to acknowledge the sun for this. One of the things that when we look at possibilities, right, and for me this is my personal omen of this week is looking for possibilities, and that being an aspect of Devic kind of behavior rather than Asuric behavior, is, we can get every bit as rigid with Ayurveda and Jyotish as anybody else can in anything. And so looking for the loopholes. I love this about Indian thought. There's always a loophole. Do this, and if you can't do that, well then do this other little version of it. And if you can't do that, then do a smaller version of it. And if you can't do that, do a smaller version of it. And if you can't do that, just visualize it somehow. And then you're good. It's sort of like the story with Jesus, where somebody gave him a wealthy man gave him a lot of money, and a very poor woman gave him a very little amount of money, but it was huge to her, and that counted more. So we do what we can do. And one of the things where I think we can use to tap into this field of possibility in Ayurveda more is looking more closely at dosage and timing. When do you give the medicine? Because if you give the medicine at the wrong time, it can act as poison. And if you give it at an time, it doesn't do much. And if you give it at the right time, it's miraculous. And so and I've never learned a lot of great stuff about timing and dosage, but one of my favorite things is from the sun. The sun has kind of shown is that the sun is what creates this daily rhythm that Dr. Svoboda was talking about, what's happening in the morning, middle of the day, late day. And one of the most practically useful things for me in my practice in terms of timing of delivery of medicine is this 24-hour cycle. And if people have issues that relate to their birth or childhood or pregnancy, to give the medicine, the right medicine, at the time that correlates with the 24-hour cycle. So if pregnancy would relate to pre-dawn, birth would relate to dawn, early childhood with early morning, midlife with midday, declining health with dusk, and nightfall to death, and then the long dark tea time of the soul, what have you. But there's a lot of people who have issues that go back to childhood, pregnancy, birth kind of issues. With this, giving medicine at pre-dawn, dawn, or early morning is so beautiful. And this is a gift the sun has given us, because it's given us this cycle and this microcosm of the macrocosm of our lives. So I'm very grateful for that and have played with that a lot. Let's take this question first. Is global warming a universal imbalance of Vata? How is this related to the planet Saturn, which you said increases Vata? Well, I think global warming does end up increasing Vata, but it's my personal feeling that it is more driven by ambition, which is a Pitta-related trait. And here's what happens. Pitta people identify with the brain. I've read some places that Pitta people have sturdy constitutions. That is crap. They think they have sturdy constitutions because they only identify with the mind, which is very strong. And so they think, I am the mind, and so therefore I am very strong. But they forget that we're also the body, which is in Pitta individuals rather delicate. So the Pitta person, I think one of the inherent life lessons is to recognize, to surrender to the pace of the body. Otherwise, we get this goal, we are driven to the goal, and our body is kind of delicate and it's not keeping up, and it's giving us little indications that there's trouble and it can't keep up, and we say, shut up, I have my goal. My goal is all important. And the body says, well, okay, all right, fine, I'll try to hold it together. But then little by little it falls apart in more and more obvious ways until actual appendages are falling off us before we get, oh, maybe I need to slow down. And so it's this ambition that is kind of driving things, an ambition for power, an ambition for money, are perhaps the main things that are driving this, okay, we need more power, we need more stuff, we need more money, we need more stuff. And that ends up really breaking the body down and creating Vata problems, but it's sort of a Pitta-driven thing. So yes, Vata is involved, and the Vata-predominant individuals, oh my God, it's hard to have, we should have hope for them. But it's very difficult right now for Vata individuals. For Pitta individuals, also very difficult because they have sort of a delicate constitution. The Kapha individuals are able to withstand this a little bit more. But I personally think the global warming thing is more of a product of this ambition, Pitta thing. Do you want to address the planet Saturn and Vata in terms of this?
How is global warming related to the planet Saturn? Which you said increases Vata. Sometime I'll address that.
Okay.
Because the planet Saturn is related to everything, especially when it is going to create a problem. So it's not necessarily the case that the planet Saturn, and after all, we shouldn't be calling it global warming. Here's the real reality. It is
Global insanity?
No. It is
Global cluster? No, I don't know.
a fire truck.
A fire truck.
Global cluster fire truck. No, it is global climate instability. You know, climates are not exactly stable anyway. They're always going through various fluctuations because of El Nino and La Nina and other kinds of, and wobbles of the Earth's axis and all kinds of other stuff. So what is maybe in the long run, particularly if we continue to work really hard to exterminate our species, in the long run maybe what will happen is that the temperatures will go up a lot and humans won't be able to survive anymore, and that'll be unhappy for possibly many other species. Of course, the Earth has survived many worse extinctions than the sixth extinction we're going through now, the Anthropocene extinction, and it will survive this too. We probably will not survive it, but it will survive it, so we can relax about that. Mother Earth will take care of herself. We'll be gone, sayonara, goodbye. So the point is, what's going to happen before that happens is that everything is going to become more chaotic, less predictable. There'll still be cyclones and hurricanes and typhoons, but they'll be bigger and they'll be more, and they'll do more damage because there is greater instability. So what's happening now is we're injecting instability into the system, and we're going to cause things to be much, even what stability there is going to become disturbed, and that's where the Vata comes in, and that's where Saturn comes in, who is simply doing his job, because our species has been a very naughty species, and we have some splaining to do, which we're going to have to do at some point when all of our karmic chickens come home to roost. In the meanwhile, Saturn is simply going to provide us repeated opportunities to wake up before we actually really take advantage of all the rope that has been given to us and permanently hang ourselves. On that note, let me continue. In a moment.
I'll say something while he's looking for that. About the deviated septum question. With the Nadi Shodhana, a lot of times people say, oh, well, what about I have a deviated septum, so doesn't that screw everything up? If you're thinking about the breath, then maybe, but if you're thinking about the prana isn't obstructed by a deviated septum. So as long as you have focus and you can bring the focus through the pathway like we were doing without the hands, then the prana will move through that. So it certainly may throw things off throughout the day. One nostril is more activated than the other, but when you're actually doing Nadi Shodhana, it doesn't particularly matter if your focus is engaged fully in both channels.
But that's a really good reason to make it a regular practice of doing Nadi Shodhana.
One of the many good reasons.
One of the many good reasons, because you know that because of that deviated septum, that the balanced functioning of the nadi is going to get screwed repeatedly during, there's always going to be a tendency. It's kind of like with the Prakriti also. Your Prakriti is a tendency for you always to move in a certain direction. And as long as you are always doing little things to keep appropriately altering that direction, then you will be more or less sailing down the river of life in the right direction.
In between questions. I love this conference. Most conferences drive me a little crazy because there's all these little subsections of people who have spent lots of hours trying to figure out what they're going to say in their 1 hour, and then they pack that hour with things, and then you're going from 1 hour session to another hour session, getting packed full of information, this technique and that technique and this study and that study. And that's the stuff we learn in school or you go learn in a workshop. To me, this is more about a retreat and more about gaining some kind of inspiration and having some sangha together, some satsang together. Charaka talks about what you need for epidemics, and perhaps we could say that global warming is an epidemic. And he says you need polluted air, polluted water, polluted earth, polluted time, including our thoughts and our leaders and so forth. Do we have polluted air? Yeah? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Do we have polluted water?
Yes.
How about polluted earth?
Mm-hmm.
How about polluted times?
Yo.
So we've got them. And do we have epidemics, in fact?
Right here.
Yeah. So, Charaka is this really practical guy. He gives us all these great recipes for basti and formulas and so forth. And if he thought that herbs and a formula were going to save us, he would have put that down. But what does he say you do to save yourself in times of epidemic? He says you have satsang, you have good company and good counsel, and you stay with that good counsel, and then, so long as it's not your destiny to die, you will be protected. And so in a time of epidemics, when we come together, we could be talking about how ashwagandha and bala can save us all from the weakening effects of everything that's going on, but that's not what he says we should be doing. He says we should be having satsang. So the main thing here is that we get together and there's some kind of real exchange, heartfelt exchange that's nourishing us, that's watering our very souls so that we can have the fortitude to withstand what's going on. Okay, that was my little rant.
And we should also have faith that, in fact, somehow or another, the universe continues to exist, even though things may not seem very attractive at the moment. The context of these two questions. I have a strong Saturn ascendant. I will go through Rahu Dasha 14 years from now. So, right there, from the context of the question, the person is worrying about their Rahu Dasha, which is 14 years from now. This means Rahu has already taken over the person. They're not thinking, so let's calculate what's going to happen before that. There's 7 years of Mars. Before that, there's 10 years of Moon, which means that this person is in Moon. So their poor Moon is being afflicted by something or another, and that is why they're thinking ahead to 14 years from now. God only knows what's going to happen 14 seconds from now, much less minutes or hours or days or weeks or months or 14 years. Anything could happen. Rahu could descend from the sky, award him or her a big medal saying that you've done really great, and the Rahu Dasha could go on just fine. We don't know that.
And
that
this
will
is
happen.
precisely what we were talking about yesterday, the dread of bad things to come and the looking forward to the good things. And really, what's the difference between the bad and good? I know that's a very Californian way to present things, but...
And that brings me to the questions that are on this piece of paper. Number one, how can one develop a good relationship, both of those words underlined twice, with Saturn and Rahu? And number two, what are the positive, underlined 3 times, aspects, underlined 4 times, of Rahu, if any, and can Rahu assist you to achieve moksha? So how to develop a good relationship with Saturn and Rahu is the same answer as how to develop a good relationship with any of the grahas. What do the grahas want? Everybody has an agenda. The agenda of the sun is that it wants, everything in the world wants you to do what it's doing. The sun wants you to shine out somehow. The moon wants you to be very lunar somehow. Saturn wants you to be very Saturnian somehow, which means you could become very crotchety and very annoying and very insane and what have you. Or you could become very disciplined and you could focus on being righteous, and you could focus on being focused, and you could focus on being on moving forward methodically, and you could focus on not permitting disturbances to disturb you, and you could focus on being humble. All of these things are what Saturn is going to want to teach you anyway. So if you learn the lesson before Saturn comes and has to beat you, because Saturn represents dull, heavy, blunt weapons, so before he has to come and beat you with clubs and stones, perhaps you should do things that will bring that sort of natural expansion of your personal sense of self that the sun might be encouraging. Maybe you can sort of bring that down to a more controllable level. And Rahu, of course, is a different graha, a head with no body. Rahu is a little bit more difficult in a certain context, a little more difficult to satisfy than Saturn, because Rahu is never satisfiable. I've gone through my Rahu Mahadasha, 18 long years of Rahu, without ever knowing what Rahu was during that period, which probably was better. And I was very young at the time. But looking back on it and looking at the experiences of people I have known who have been in Rahu Mahadashas, I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that it is impossible ever to be completely satisfied with anything during that period. It just won't happen.
And even if you know Jyotish and you go through your Rahu period, you may not know what it's about. It's a shadow. It's confusing.
It's a shadow. Jupiter, Saturn is the sun of a shadow. And by definition, a shadow is something that you cannot see accurately. What there is about Rahu that is useful is Rahu offers the possibility to think original thoughts. Rahu offers the possibility of great expansion. Rahu offers the possibility of being able to look into things that are occult and hidden and unknown and difficult to express rationally.
And see the possibilities.
And see the possibilities of. Rahu probably does not promote moksha quite as much as Ketu does. My Jyotish mentor used to say that, there are basically three planets any planet can assist you to move in the direction of moksha as long as you really learn what that planet is trying to teach you, because moksha means moham kshayati, the destruction of delusion. And life is all about, unfortunately, for many people, if not most, proceeding from one delusion to another. So moksha, he would say that there are three planets that can encourage you to go towards moksha. All of them can, but three are particularly empowered to do that. The first one is Guru, Jupiter. And you will read holy books, and you will meditate, and you will recite holy mantras, and go to holy pujas, and you will attend satsang. And satsangatve nisangatvam sangatve nirmohatvam. The more that you're in satsanga, the less moha there will be. And automatically you'll move in the direction of moksha. And Saturn can also assist you to move in the direction of moksha, because he will either throw you in jail or break your leg or cause you to become kind of tossed out from society in some other way. And then you can either become really Saturnine and brood on it and become bitter and astringent, or you can acknowledge that, great, now I can meditate for unlimited periods of time and I will head in the direction of moksha. And K2 provides the opportunity to go into moksha in a sudden way. At night you think, tomorrow I'm going to go rob the bank, and the next morning you wake up and think, I believe instead of robbing the bank, I will go move to the Himalaya and live in a hut for the rest of my life. And it seems perfectly rational. More difficult for Rahu to do that, but stranger things have occurred. Next.
Okay, this is a reflection on malefic versus benefic. And I love this. Alignment of one's being with the grahas / nature relates with one's own dharma, resulting in relates with one's dharma, resulting in benefic energies. Adharmic living is going against one's nature, resulting in malefic energies. Both energies are part of universe and life, and they will manifest. Following one's dharma is unharmful, positive. Adharma is harmful and more difficult. I love this, and I love this. In the Gita it says it's better to follow your dharma, even if it kills you, than to follow the dharma of someone else. And also says that when you don't follow your dharma, it breeds fear and insecurity. So there's, what is good, and we've seen saints who were warriors and killed people, and is that good or bad? If that was in their dharma, perhaps it was a good thing. There's a place for warriors. There's a place for, is it violence? Is it violence if it's coming from a place, if you're completely in integrity and in your dharma, which is to say perhaps being in line with your heart and your speech and your mind, and having the courage to follow the voice that you see so clearly and within. If you have the courage to do that, it might look evil to one person or look good to another person, but to you it's all the same. You're just living your dharma. So, very nice reflection. Thank you.
India has two major epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. The Ramayana is all about Rama's ayana. It's the path of Rama and the turning of the individual in the direction of Rama. And Rama, whether or not we as observers may agree, he was very convinced of what his dharma was. He followed it, and that's the story that's the story. The Mahabharata is all about the fact that if you really look at the situation, everybody in the book had conflicting dharmas that they couldn't really, poor old Bhishma, for example, he kept trying to do what he thought was the right thing, and he kept making bigger problems for himself and other people. He was one of the most dharmic people. He was the son of the king in the river, after all. But the more that he tried to follow the path that he believed it was obligatory for him to follow, the more the challenges mounted. Which brings me to this question. How can one differentiate between signs that indicate that you have to change your path and obstacles that are coming to you in the right path that you should be following? It's a very good question that has no one answer, because in the same way that people in the Mahabharata were trying to figure out what was going on, it will be even more. We're in a much more complex and a much more confused period, and will be even more difficult for us to try to figure out what is going on. It does, however, we can remember that the nature of your path through life, and one word for path in Sanskrit is pata, which sounds like path and comes from the same root. Another word for path is marga, and marga comes from the word mruga, which means a deer. How does a deer move through the forest? Does the deer move through the forest in a nice straight line? No. The deer moves according to the terrain. The deer moves according to the vegetation, but most importantly, the deer is moving according to the currents of prana that are present in the forest. So the deer is aligning itself with those currents of prana and sort of swimming through that prana through the forest. So it is sometimes very difficult to be able to tell the difference between an obstacle on the proper path and an indication to you that you're on the wrong path. But this is why we hope that you have somehow found, with the help of your Ishtadevata or your guru or your advisor or a bolt of lightning from heaven or something like that, that you have some concept of what it means to feel like that you are moving in the right direction. And that what you're feeling when you are moving in the right direction is that you are aligning yourself well with the prana that is moving in the general direction of things. And as your awareness becomes more subtle, it usually becomes easier to be able to determine whether or not you are you have positioned yourself in such a way so that you are flowing along with the current of prana that you should be flowing along with, and that you're not off on some tangent. Though I feel obliged to observe that if a particular graha has seriously taken over your head, you may be completely convinced that you are moving in the right direction, even when you proceed directly over the cliff. So you can only do what you can you can do your best to Manusya Yatna Ishvara Krupa. You can do your best to try to do what everything that you know is right, and you can bow down to reality and say, look, I'm doing the best that I can, and I'm requesting you to provide me with every possible hint you can to suggest whether I'm going in the right direction or not the right direction, and I will do my best to try to pay attention to those indications, because I realize that indications are being provided to me all the time and I do not always pay attention, but I'm going to really try hard to pay attention. Om.
These last two questions are so intimately related. You know, how do I know what's an obstacle and living Dharma? Am I living my Dharma or not living my Dharma? And those of you from the West are probably pretty clear about how the word Dharma is used in the U.S. or in the West. It's not at all uncommon for someone to come to a teacher and say, oh, help me find my Dharma. What is my Dharma? And what it really comes down to when you have a conversation around this is the person is asking, what should I be doing with my life? You know, is it my Dharma to be a healer or a baker or a candlestick maker? And if I'll pick my Dharma, I'll get to choose my Dharma. Will you help me, you know, figure out what my Dharma is going to be? It's as if it's this something that happens in the future and that we get to pick. That we get to, rather than a moment-to-moment experience of living in the Dharma or not living in the Dharma. You know, so often somebody will say, oh, they declare, I have found my Dharma, this is my Dharma, this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to be a healer. But then things change and maybe nobody's coming to them, and so it's not really quite working out, and then maybe I'll go become a banker. And so then what's happening is your Dharma changing and picking a new Dharma. You know what, this Dharma didn't work out. Dharma isn't a career. It's just newsflash. It's not a career. It's not something we pick that we feel great about doing. It's more perhaps a way of being. And in this being, it's again the living in integrity perhaps between what we're saying, what we're feeling, what we're hearing, what's going on in the heart and the mind and the tongue, and having the courage to do that. And in this case, it's not a choice. It's a practice every morning. This is why we have practices in the morning of listening. We have to practice listening inside, opening that interior apparatus like we practiced this morning some, looking in there. If we can't be enlightened and hear the inner voice of God booming out at us, to just feel how things are going, connect with what's going on inside. And if we have what looks like a choice in front of us, should I take this road or that road? Should I take this road, yes or no? We either hear a yes, or we hear a no, or we hear nothing. There's just a quietness. And then there's only a question that remains. Do we have the courage to follow the yes? Do we have the courage to follow the no? Or do we have the courage to do nothing when there's no voice? Have any of you seen the movie Lincoln, about Abraham Lincoln? It's a fantastic movie, and whether or not it's accurate or not, they say it's pretty accurate, but I don't know, whether or not it's accurate or not, one of the things I love about this movie is that it shows a character, Abraham Lincoln, who is comfortable doing nothing when nothing is called for. And everybody else is so uncomfortable doing nothing. They want to do something, and they're telling him, you have to make this decision, you have to do this thing, you have to, these the representatives of the opposing side wanted to come to negotiate with him, but it was not the right time to negotiate. But they were coming towards him, and all his ministers were like, "You have to say yes. You know, make this to meet with them." And he just didn't want to, because he wanted things to. He just didn't feel like it was the right time. And they're freaking out, and he's just comfortable doing nothing. It's this comfortable courage that he possesses to do nothing. And even when he's finally pushed so much that he has to say something to them, to the opposing counsel, he says, yeah, well, come this far and then wait. It buys him some time, and then things move in a different direction. So we keep thinking we have all these choices we have to make in life, and if we make this choice, it'll be unobstructed, and if we make that choice, it'll be great, and if we make this choice, it'll be dharmic, and this choice will be undharmic. But really, in a sense, there's only the choice, are we going to act in accordance with what we hear inside, and can we hear inside? And if we can't, can we practice doing that? It comes down to that, and it's rather choiceless at that point. It's not, oh, I chose to go to Vaidyagrama and do this thing. It's, that was the right thing to do at the moment, and I cooperated with that. It's, do I have the courage to cooperate with reality or not? Is what it comes down to there. Ooh, we were supposed to end it 5 minutes ago.
Oh, well. There we are. And sometimes the choice is not evident, and sometimes it's only afterwards that you learn that you ended up doing the wrong thing. But then you've had some valuable experience, and now you know not to do that in the future. The problem so often comes when you become dogmatic about something. And it's very easy for the sun to become dogmatic because the sun believes so strongly in its own dharma. And if your sun is too influential in your life, horoscopically, this may make you kind of dogmatic. If there is ever a question about that, make it a point to ensure that the karmas that you perform, that your karma will run over your dogma. Okay. I thought it was kind of cute.
It's good. No, it's good, yeah. I'm sure nobody's heard that before.
There are other questions. We will come to them at some point, but not now, because we're leaving now.
And where's...
Om Shri Suryaya Namaha. Adityaya cha Somaya, Mangalaya Vidaya cha, Guru Shukra Shanibhyascha, Rahave Ketave Namaha, Adityaya cha Somaya, Idam Namama.
Till tomorrow, or later today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Svoboda and Dr. Zclaudia Welch. Most of the times I'm busy doing nothing. You can meet my parents, they always say that. But I'm not Lincoln. All right, a couple of announcements. Our next session is at 10:30, a very interesting session by Dr. N. Gopalakrishnan on integrated Vedic management in applied form for day-to-day life. So that's going to be the session at 10:30. A couple of other announcements. The tea is being served outside here on your left, and when you walk out, you'll see some artwork, right? That artwork is done by your footwear. We have some volunteers, Anupreet and Rajesh, who've arranged your footwear very neatly. So be kind to them and thank them, but more importantly, when you come back, keep it back the same way. In addition, just once again, do make sure that you keep your devices or whatever with you, or your bags, because as we said, there are a lot of planets and possessed planets around us who may take your bags, and we would not be responsible. So barring that, we'll see you back at 10:30, 10:29 to be exact, back here. The tea is outside on your left. Thank you, everyone.